We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dewbs & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching GB News. Coming up on Dewbs & Co tonight, the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood has opened a new £400 million prison in North Yorkshire that has room for nearly 1,500 inmates. The prison is pioneering a new approach to jail time, focusing on giving prisoners essential skills for employment. But with ensuite cells and muted pastel colours, are we at risk of making prison life too attractive? And an astonishing quarter of Britons are now registered disabled, and the welfare bill for ADHD and anxiety claims has hit £3.5 billion a year. Despite the reforms to disability benefits announced in yesterday's spring statement, welfare costs are forecast to continue to rise. We'll be asking, how can Britain afford the bill? And US President Donald Trump has made sweeping new demands of Ukraine, pushing for control of all of the embattled country's mineral and energy assets. Is Trump behaving like a bully, or is America right to demand repayment for Ukraine's war debt? And men are prepared to sacrifice family lives for successful careers in a way many women aren't. Those are the words of Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Sexist? Or does he have a point? And are those sacrifices worth it? He was speaking at an event in Parliament. Farage argued that people should be judged on merit in the workplace, not on certain characteristics. And joining me for what promises to be a lively discussion tonight, I've got my panel, Ben Habib, chairman of Great British PAC, and Joe Phillips, journalist and former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown. But first, the latest news headlines.
Very good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. At least 144 people have now known to have died and hundreds are injured in Myanmar following a 7.7 magnitude earthquake. Tremors from that quake have been felt in neighbouring countries, including Thailand, where an unfinished high-rise collapsed. 81 construction workers are still missing and a search and rescue operation is underway into the night. Rescue teams there say the death toll could rise into the thousands. Here at home, the head of the government's anti-extremism programme, Prevent, is stepping down after serious failings were exposed by the Southport attack. Michael Stewart's departure follows a review that found Prevent prematurely dismissed the threat posed by Axel Rudakabana. He was flagged to the programme 3 times before his attack, but concerns were not acted on. The Times newspaper is reporting Stewart is leaving his role in the wake of that scandal. The King has been seen in public for the first time since his brief hospital stay, waving to well-wishers as he left Clarence House this morning. But he's cancelled today's engagements due to temporary side effects from cancer treatment. Buckingham Palace says His Majesty does send his apologies to anyone disappointed or inconvenienced. He's expected to spend the weekend in the countryside with no major changes to his diary, at least for now. Controversial sentencing rules that sparked a 2-tier justice row are staying in place. The Sentencing Council has rejected pressure from the Justice Secretary to scrap guidance, letting judges consider ethnicity when punishing offenders. Well, earlier today, the Prime Minister told us here on GB News that advice should be changed. Here's what he had to say to our political editor, Christopher Hope.
Well, I'm disappointed in this response, and the Lord Chancellor is obviously continuing to engage on this, and we're considering our response. All options are on the table, but I am disappointed at this outcome, and now we'll have to consider what we do as a result.
Meanwhile, Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood has opened a new £400 million super prison in Yorkshire that can hold up to 1,500 inmates. Category C jail HMP Millsyke is the size of 39 football pitches and is part of the government's drive to create 14,000 extra prison places. Inmates will help name cell blocks and have a say in how the prison is run. It's also designed with pastel paint and greenery to promote well-being and reduce bad behaviour. And if, like me, you're keen on some pick and mix, well, the hunt on the high street has just got slightly harder. W.H. Smith is set to vanish after more than 2 centuries, and all 480 of its shops have been snapped up in a £76 million deal. They'll be rebranded as T.G. Jones, with all 5,000 staff moving to a new owner. W.H. Smith isn't disappearing completely, though. It is keeping its airport and train station branches open. But for town centres, it's the end of the road. After 230 years, the sign for W.H. Smith is finally coming down. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you for a full roundup in an hour's time. Now, though, it's over to Miriam.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and joining me until 7 o'clock, I've got my panel, Ben Habib, chairman of the Great British PAC and former deputy leader of Reform UK, and Joe Phillips, journalist and former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown. And of course, we want to know what you think at home about all the topics we're going to be discussing tonight, so get your views in at gbnews.com/your say. Now, a new £400 million super prison has been opened in North Yorkshire. HMP Mill site has been designed to enhance prisoner wellbeing and encourage good behaviour, for example, by using softer pastel paint colours on walls and cell doors. Now, it's hoped that the new prison will tackle the overcrowding crisis in Britain, whilst also providing offenders nearing the end of their sentences with 16 training workshops where inmates can learn skills that range from bricklaying, carpentry and waste management so that they're ready for employment upon release. Now, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary who opened the prison, suggested she was ready to introduce controversial Texas-style changes to sentencing that could result in criminals who are serving long sentences being released sooner from prison. But the prison that has allotments, 3 multi-use games areas with an outdoor gym, and ensuite cells with showers, desks, kettles and windows, not bars, perhaps some prisoners won't want to be released. So is prison really the deterrent it needs to be? Ben, of course, the main reason that this prison has been built and opened is to solve Britain's overcrowding crisis, I think, 1,500 places. But it's going to spark some controversy. I mean, I've seen Premier Inn rooms look not quite as good as some of these cells.
Well, the cost is vast, £400 million for 1,500 places, which works out at about £270,000 per room. So, you know, I'm not surprised that it's well appointed with gyms and theatres and God knows what else. But I mean, I think Shabana Mahmood is confusing 2 things here. She talks rightly about the need to rehabilitate in advance of releasing prisoners back into society. But rehabilitation is not the equivalent of spoiling people. Remember, these people have committed crimes and they're in prison for a good reason. And their situation in prison doesn't need to be made comfortable. They should be rehabilitated. They should be given skills, granted. We don't want them to reoffend when they come back out. But I think the best way to make sure people don't reoffend is not to reward them for criminality by giving them these this plush accommodation and actually make it clear to them that if you are convicted for a serious crime, for a particular period of time, then you will serve your sentence. And she talks about releasing prisoners who behave well. Well, we don't have to go back too many months when this Labour government was releasing prisoners indiscriminately back into society, violent criminals who'd repeatedly committed crimes, and at the same time they were locking up people for what they had said and tweets and so on. And so we don't have joined-up thinking here from our government.
I'm so sorry. Joe, I will bring you in soon, but we are going to have to cross to some breaking news because US Vice President J.D. Vance is speaking in Greenland as President Donald Trump has renewed his insistence that Washington should take control of the semi-autonomous Danish territory. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I want to thank our guardians, our airmen, and everyone else for the warm reception in a very, very cold place. I think it's probably the coldest place I've ever been, but you guys managed to do a great job despite the weather. I want to bring a message for President Trump. He's grateful for your service, grateful for what you do up here, and just wanted me to tell you that he's proud of you and he thinks about you. And of course, the same is true for everybody that's flanking me up here. We're thrilled to be here because the mission that you guys do is so important for the United States. It's important for our national security. And today, everybody that I met to a person was professional, was kind, was knowledgeable, and was dedicated to our country. You're a great credit to the United States of America, even though you are very, very far from home. I met some Texans and some Floridians today, and I thought to myself, man, you guys have really signed up for tough duty here in Greenland, but it's a beautiful place. It's a striking place, a very harsh place. The Colonel showed me around, but a very beautiful place. Even in right now, I guess we're still, at least here in Greenland, in the heart of what is winter, because winter, I guess, lasts about 9 months here in Greenland. So I want to thank our reporters for following us around today and covering what we're doing. We'll take some questions from the reporters, but before we did that, I wanted to give some of my special guests an opportunity to say a few words. So we, of course, are thrilled to be joined by Juliet, our National Security Advisor's wife, and by my wife, our Second Lady, Usha. And flanking me here on my left is Chris Wright, our Secretary of Energy, Mike Waltz, our National Security Advisor, and my dear friend, Senator Mike Lee from the great state of Utah, who I joked earlier, I told Mike I'd give him a ride to Utah, and we ended up in Greenland. But I want to, because each of them care about this territory and care about the mission of the American military here in Greenland, for various reasons, touching each of the areas that they focus on, I thought it would be worth hearing from each of them for a little while. So, Chris, if you would say a few words about the importance of energy. Thanks, Chris. Here we are.
I will. Let me echo the Vice President's comments to thank you for your service to our country, wherever it is, whatever it takes. And I think we see right here in this beautiful air base in the high Arctic what energy can do. We can make a tough high Arctic environment a beautiful place to live, a comfortable place to live, all sorts of scientific instrumentation, military mission to monitor what's going on in the world. None of this was possible not long ago. President Trump was elected to re-energize America, to take the beauty that you've seen up here and make that a thing of pride and ambition again, not shaming of energy, not trying to stop its growth and its prosperity, but to re-energize it. So energy makes the world a beautiful place to live. It makes us comfortable and have long, opportunity-rich lives. I'm thrilled and proud to be part of this administration with President Trump and Vice President Vance. Thank you all for your service. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you, Chris. Mike?
I guess when we flew in, it did look a little bit like Utah in the wintertime. Only there is substantial portions of this land that are always covered in ice, and it doesn't change. I really enjoyed...
Now you can continue watching the stream of J.D. Vance and the other people in that party if you head over to GBN2 or YouTube. Joe, I mean, this whole Greenland issue has really become quite controversial, but actually the US has been trying to get hold of Greenland for well over a century, if you look back in the history. But do you think they have got any chance of success?
Do you know what? I am so tired of seeing these blokes, because they are mainly blokes, behaving as though they're on some sort of estate agent's bonding weekend in their crappy suits, divvying up parts of the world and, you know, brushing and bullying around. Yes, of course they want Greenland, but, you know, they want Canada. They probably want Scotland. They probably want France.
I think Donald Trump owns half of Scotland.
No, they definitely don't want France. Who in their right mind would want France?
Anybody who's got a sense of culture, history,
who likes cheese and wine,
and all those things, Ben. We could go on for that. I mean, you know, OK, he's there. Everybody's going to say it's great. I don't know why he took Mike Waltz. He could have just released the whole details on a, you know, signal messaging thing. They are just like kids. They are boys going round. Nobody wanted to see him. It was supposed to be Mrs. Vance going to watch some dog sled racing, which I'm not aware up until this very week that she had been particularly interested in.
Yes, it was supposed to be a hearts and minds mission, but they couldn't find any hearts and minds. But Ben, I mean, this is how, obviously, in Europe, with our sensibilities and our history, it looks like a power grab. But actually, underneath the surface, Greenland is such an important strategic landmass for intercepting potential Russian missiles. The US has already got an awful lot of military presence in Greenland. It's not quite the harebrained scheme that it could seem.
And I take slight issue with you, Joe, if I may.
Of course you do, Ben. That's why we're here.
A bunch of blokes. It was a military gathering, and there were some...
Well, it's amazing, you know, they do have women in the military.
There were some women in the front row, in fatigues.
I meant the men within the Trump administration, not the people he was visiting.
So I'm a great admirer of J.D. Vance. I haven't heard all his speeches, but the speeches I have heard, I think, are absolutely bang on when he called out our lack of freedom of speech in Europe, the increasing control of...
Countries that haven't fought a war.
What's that?
Countries that haven't fought a war, some random country.
He did make clear he wasn't thinking of Britain and was perhaps thinking of Germany.
Maybe he should have thought about it.
Perhaps,
before.
indeed. Yeah, but he probably wasn't saying it for European press.
Well,
yeah,
We're digressing. But on that point, he is right. The United Kingdom has hollowed out its defences. Germany, which is the next biggest spender on military defence in Europe, is actually absolutely hopeless in its defence. And Europe, who, you know, big sabre rattlers when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, actually couldn't even begin to mount the kind of campaign that would be required
back to Greenland.
Yeah, OK.
In fact, we are going back to Greenland right now, to the men in their suits on their estate agent trips. Here we go, US Vice President J.D. Vance again speaking in Greenland after Trump has renewed his insistence that Washington might take control.
And I learned a lot about that today myself. Of course, you can read about it in a book, but I saw it up close and personal. And if, God forbid, to my fellow Americans, if a missile was fired from an enemy country or an enemy submarine into the United States, it is the people here before us who would give notice to our brave men and women further south in the United States to let people know what was coming and, God willing, to try to shoot it down and prepare for it. That's one of the things that we do at installations like this. We know that Russia and China and other nations are taking an extraordinary interest in Arctic passageways and Arctic naval routes, and indeed in the minerals of the Arctic territories. We need to ensure that America is leading in the Arctic, because we know that if America doesn't, other nations will fill the gap where we fall behind. So what you guys do is so critically important. I think a lot of Americans, certainly I, didn't realize it fully until President Trump started talking about the importance of our Arctic mission, about building upon it and ensuring that America can lead in the Arctic for the next generation. And now I want to talk about, of course, the interaction and what Denmark, I think, has done, and sometimes in partnership with us. But let's be honest, what Denmark over the last 20 years has failed to do in some cases, because we know that, unfortunately, this place, this base, the surrounding area is less secure than it was 30, 40 years ago, because some of our allies haven't kept up. As China and Russia have taken greater and greater interest in Greenland, in this base, in the activities of the brave Americans right here, we know that too often our allies in Europe have not kept pace. They haven't kept pace with military spending, and Denmark has not kept pace in devoting the resources necessary to keep this base, to keep our troops, and in my view, to keep the people of Greenland safe from a lot of very aggressive incursions from Russia, from China, and from other nations. Now, President Trump, as he says all the time, and as a lot of people recognize, is a president of peace. We want to have good relationships with everybody. That includes, even to the extent possible, the Chinese and the Russians. But part of having good relations is showing your strength when you have to. And unfortunately, the story of Greenland over the past 20 years when it comes to security is that we've underinvested in the infrastructure, we've underinvested in the security architecture, and we've underinvested in the brave men and women who are doing a very hard job, as Mike said, to keep all of us safe. That has to change. Now, when I pointed out a couple of weeks ago that in some ways, with all due respect to our Danish allies, they had not kept pace, there was a lot of criticism from Denmark, a lot of attacks at the Trump administration, at the president, at me, at others in our administration for saying the obvious, which is that Denmark hasn't done a good job at keeping Greenland safe. And one of the things I heard was, well, what about the many Danes who lost their lives in the war on terror fighting alongside the United States? Well, look, we obviously honor the sacrifice of our Danish friends in the war on terror 20 years ago, just as, for example, the French honor the sacrifice of Americans in Normandy 80 years ago. But recognizing that there are important security partnerships in the past does not mean that we can't have disagreements with allies in the present about how to preserve our shared security for the future. And that's what this is about. There is no amount of bullying, no amount of obfuscating, no amount of confusing the issue. Our message to Denmark is very simple. You have not done a good job by the people of Greenland. You have underinvested in the people of Greenland, and you have underinvested in the security architecture of this incredible, beautiful landmass filled with incredible people. That has to change. And because it hasn't changed, this is why President Trump's policy in Greenland is what it is. It's consistent with the first Trump administration, where you saw significant investments in Arctic security, and it will continue over the next 4 years under President Trump's leadership. And let me finally, before I kick it over to the media, make one comment about the people of Greenland. The colonel here, the base commander, who came here first as a second lieutenant, and I guess, Colonel, this is your second duty station here, and we're proud of you and proud of all of you guys who are serving and helping keep us safe. You know, I heard a lot about the respect that our American troops show for the local Greenlandic population, the way that we make and create shelter for hunters and dog sledders, the way that we found ways to turn over traditional tribal land to some of the local populations in order to ensure that they're able to live in accordance with their values. We respect, as the president said in his State of the Union address, we respect the self-determination of Greenlanders, excuse me. We believe in the self-determination of the population of the people of Greenland. And our argument is very simple. It is not with the people of Greenland, who I think are incredible and have an incredible opportunity here. Our argument really is with the leadership of Denmark, which is underinvested in Greenland and underinvested in its security architecture. That simply must change. It is the policy of the United States that will change, and I'm proud to be able to stand here with so many brave Americans to better understand the security mission and better understand what you guys do each and every day. For that, I'm grateful for your service. I'm even more grateful. I love you guys. I'm proud of you guys, and President Trump stands behind you and will for the remainder of his administration. Thank you all. God bless you. All right, now we'll take a few questions. Both you guys have your hands up. Whoever can go first. Red scarf, go first.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Do you have any plans, are there plans to expand the U.S.'s military presence in Greenland beyond this base?
Well, are there immediate plans to expand our military presence? No, but are there general objectives that we want to accomplish that will certainly require us investing more resources, investing in additional military, icebreakers, investing in additional naval ships that will have a greater presence in Greenland? Absolutely. And we know that's necessary because we know, as Mike talked about, and certainly I talked about, there has been an expansion of the security footprint and the security interest of Russia and China. They're doing what they believe is in their interest. The United States must do what I know is in our interest, which is to make sure that Greenland is safe. If Greenland doesn't have self-determination, if the people of Greenland have their future controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, it's not going to make their lives better off, and most importantly, it's going to make American and world national security, world security, much, much weaker. We in some ways need to wake up. We need to wake up from a failed 40-year consensus that said that we could ignore the encroachment of powerful countries as they expand their ambitions. We can't just bury our head in the sand, or in Greenland, bury our head in the snow and pretend that the Chinese are not interested in this very large landmass. We know that they are. They've taken steps to put Greenland in ridiculous debt traps to invest and exploit the resources here. And we know that they're sending a lot of military resources here. Yes, over the medium term, the United States will meet that challenge. We will put our own resources here. We already have a lot of great resources here, but we know we're going to have to do more to counter some of the nations that we know that we're competitive with. Sure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President. And the president said today that we have to have Greenland. By being here today, are you also conveying that message that the U.S. is very serious in its desire to acquire Greenland?
Well, the president said we have to have Greenland, and I think that we do have to be more serious about the security of Greenland. We can't just ignore this place. We can't just ignore the president's desires, but most importantly, we can't ignore what I said earlier, which is the Russian and Chinese encroachment in Greenland. We have to do more. Now, what the president said in his State of the Union address, and he was very clear about this, is we respect the self-determination of the people of Greenland, but my argument again to them is I think that you'd be a lot better coming under the United States security umbrella than you have been under Denmark's security umbrella. Because what Denmark's security umbrella has meant is effectively they've passed it all off to brave Americans and hoped that we would pick up the tab. We're simply saying to the people of Greenland, when the president says we've got to have Greenland, he's saying this island is not safe. A lot of people are interested in it. A lot of people are making a play. We know that America cares about the security of this island for the sake of the people of Greenland, but also for the sake of the national security interests of the United States of America. So our message is very simple. Yes, the people of Greenland are going to have self-determination. We hope that they choose to partner with the United States because we're the only nation on earth that will respect their sovereignty and respect their security, because their security is very much our security, as these brave Americans show.
John Parkinson with ABC News. Thanks for bringing us along on this historic trip. I wanted to ask you about last week's news with the Atlantic. We've had a couple questions on Greenland. I feel like you've answered that. But I did want to ask, did you express your concerns to the president that you were opposed to the Houthi strike? And also, what did you mean when you asked, or when you said in that thread that the president wasn't aware that his directions for Yemen were inconsistent with his message on Europe?
Well, I didn't quite say that. I think that's a slight misunderstanding of what I said. But we've talked, of course, in the American media about Signalgate, as I called it, for the past week. And here's what I told the president and the entire national security team is that, yes, it is in the interest of the United States of America to preserve navigation. Yes, it is in the interest of the United States to kill terrorists who are preventing navigation in the Red Sea, but we got to make sure that we do it right. We have to be careful. We have to make sure the timing is right. And of course, what that leak revealed, I think, is a private communication between the president's senior advisors about how best to prepare the American people for what we all thought we had to do, about the right timing of when we should do something, and of course, surfacing the strategic questions that we needed to decide and brief the president on so that he could ultimately make the decision about what we would do. What I saw in that Signal chat, and of course what I've seen in the president's senior national security team, is that sometimes we all agree and sometimes we all disagree, but it's important that we all have an honest conversation amongst ourselves and with the president of the United States about what we think is the best interest of the national security of the United States of America. I support the president's decision to strike the Houthis. I always supported the president's decision to strike the Houthis, and I support the national security team having the argument about how best to serve the American people. Good.
In your security Vice President J.D. Vance there at a press conference in Greenland. And Joe, I mean, this is actually very pragmatic, isn't it? In Europe, for a long time, we've relied on the Americans being so ideologically committed to the idea of liberal democracy that they will defend us whatever the cost. Now they're saying, do you know what, enough's enough.
Well, there's nothing new in that, Miriam. Kennedy said it in the 1960s. I mean, every US president, you know, from him and Obama and Reagan, they've all said the same point. And there is some truth in that Europe has not and has always looked to America to come and bail them out. You don't have to be quite so belligerent, but what I find astonishing from what we've just been listening to about J.D. Vance, apart from the fact that why on earth does he need to go there? He's only talking to the American press. He's surrounded by American military and his American team because the Greenlanders are quite busy forming a new coalition because they only had an election last week. And it doesn't sound from that as though there are any local journalists there. But he's talked about the threat of Russia to Greenland. What about the threat of Russia to Ukraine? What about, you know, Russia exploiting resources? But what about Ukraine? It's inconsistent.
Well, we will be discussing that very shortly, but just a quick reaction from you, Ben. Is it appropriate for Vance to go to Greenland?
I didn't see any inconsistencies in what his position is on Greenland versus Russia. Russia, as Trump pointed out, has a big body of water between the United States and
55 miles.
Ukraine. And, Greenland, he touched on it. Greenland is not just of military significance, it's also it's very rich in resources. And there is, as the Arctic melts, these resources are coming into play. Geopolitical tension is going to rise in that part of the world as people compete for resources. And what we're seeing from America, which is exactly what Trump and Vance said that they would do, is a more muscular United States of America, making sure that American interests are put first. And I completely endorse his criticism of Denmark. He was absolutely right to point out that we are grateful, or they're grateful, and we are in this country grateful for Denmark's contribution to the war on terror and any other conflict zone in which they've stood by Western allies. But that's not the same as giving up the self-protection of Europe at the moment. And I would say that European nations, including the United Kingdom, have actually been asleep at the wheel for the last 30 years. We've talked incessantly about the peace dividend. Two most damaging words when it comes to the defence of our country. Peace dividend. There's no such thing as a peace dividend. In order to maintain peace, you've got to spend money on military, and we have turned our back on it. And for Starmer and Macron and all these other leaders across Europe to rattle their sabres in Russia's face and say, well, you know, we're going to put British boots on the ground, that would be a fine thing to do if we were the rich country that we once were, and that we had a military that was capable of doing it.
Yes, but Ben, most of the countries of Europe, including Germany, as you mentioned earlier, are now stepping up. This government, our government, has brought forward
2.2 billion. It's a drop in the ocean.
Yes, it may well be a drop in the ocean, and we're probably going to come on to the cost of living and the state of the economy later in the programme if we have time. But the point is, yes, they've got the message, they've got it loud and clear. Do you think it is appropriate for these bully boys from America to go around the world basically telling other countries that they are wrong, that they are failing, while at the same time they're willing to do a deal with Putin and do Putin's work for him to let Ukraine just be given away, and that will mean...
But, Jo, I mean, let's leave Ukraine for one side, because we will come on to that. But we've given them permission to do that by, for 50 years, allowing them to be the world's policeman, relying on them to have that patriarchal role, and so now they're taking it.
Up to a point. But they have made their point, and we saw the disgusting behaviour towards President Zelensky in the Oval Office.
I didn't see any disgusting behaviour.
Well, I did, and so did a lot of people.
I watched the whole 40-minute interview, and Zelensky was poking the Trump administration throughout the interview. At some point, Trump and Vance had to respond. Zelensky has been put on a kind of woke pedestal in Western Europe.
Ridiculous.
Absolutely right. We won't stand.
What is woke about war?
Let me explain. We won't stand up for our own sovereignty. We won't stop people illegally crossing the channel to enter our country.
You're like a broken record.
No, and yet we bang on about the need for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. What about our territorial integrity?
We're not talking about that for once.
But, Jo, do you not think, though, that some of this is just about style, and we are so unused now in Europe to somebody standing, being muscular, as Ben says.
Well,
and actually, if you look beneath the surface of what seems to us unseemly or even insulting, actually, the pragmatism that's going on behind the scenes is just what we need.
It's not... you might call it muscular. I think it's rude. I wouldn't...
But that's what I'm saying. Is this just style? Right? I'm not saying it's not important, but is it just style?
Well, it may well be, but it's a style that many people find deeply offensive. It's rude, it's boorish...
It's rude.
It's ignorant...
Joe, it's rude because he's telling us some home truths which we don't want to hear.
And he's got his message across, and that's why Europe is coming together, increasing spending, and it's why Europe has been absolutely steadfast in supporting the Ukraine.
Well, at the risk of being rude, I'm going to interrupt, I'm afraid, because we need to move on. And coming up, don't go anywhere, a shocking 2 million Brits are now on sickness benefits. But will Labour's plans get them back to work? And is Trump going too far on Ukraine? Well, I think we know what our panel thinks, but we'll be discussing that more. Stay with us.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
After a very wet March, the final couple of days of the month look like seeing some sunshine for Spain and Portugal. But we are going to see some showers over Greece and Turkey. 1 or 2 showers possible for Madeira and the Canaries on Sunday. There's that sunshine over Spain and Portugal, but a northerly breeze will bring a cool feel to the Balearics across Corsica and Sardinia. Plenty of showers for Greece and Turkey on Sunday. They should be fading, though, by Monday, and into Tuesday we'll see some sunshine and temperatures will be rising in Barcelona.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
The latest GB News Travel.
A very good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Well, there are long queues in Greater Manchester on the M60 on the anti-clockwise carriageway. The left lane I can see on camera is closed just before junction 19 at the Heaton Park 3 Hours roundabout east of Prestwich, of course, following a collision. And in the West Midlands on the M42, the motorway is partly blocked southbound just after junction 6, the Birmingham Airport exit, due to an ongoing incident there. On the M3 heading towards London, the 2 outside lanes are blocked off just south of the M25 following an accident. And on the M4 in Berkshire, London bound, long queues from Reading to Bracknell. 2 cars have collided. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. And today, new data has revealed that a shocking 25% of all Brits are now on sickness benefits. The most commonly cited issues amongst claimants are mental health concerns, with a significant increase since the COVID pandemic. Now, forecasts suggest that the disability benefits bill could add up to an eye-watering £100 billion a year by 2040. That's almost £2 billion a week. In her spring statement yesterday, the Chancellor pledged to cut disability benefits to help balance the nation's books. But dozens of Labour MPs are expected to vote against these reforms. Now, have a look at this chart. Here are the biggest government spends, the top 5. As you can see, social protection or welfare is now by far and away the biggest element of government spending. It does include pensions, of course. That's about half of that spend. And let's have a look now at the health and disability spend year on year. As you can see, it is forecast to go up and up and up. So, of course, Rachel Reeves has made some changes to disability benefits, but nevertheless, the rate at which people are signing on to these benefits and ageing population and all those other factors do mean that it will continue to increase. And then have a look at this one. This is the share of the ages of people claiming these sorts of benefits. And the dark blue blocks are older people. And you can see that has gone up a little bit. But the main increase in disability benefits are paid to younger people. And we know that there's now nearly 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds not in education, employment or training. So this is a big problem now. It's going to be an even bigger problem in the future. Joe, let's come to you first. I mean, whatever we think about the welfare state and what it's appropriate to support people with, we just cannot afford this anymore.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, I think what's so shocking about those figures is the increase in young people who are claiming disability. I mean, it is quite clear that, you know, as we all know, we've got an ageing population. People are living longer, but they are living longer with a lot of multiple medical issues. But, you know, that's one of those things. What I think is concerning, and I think, you know, it is very much the government's aim, as was outlined in the spring statement, to try and get people off benefits, but we have to do it properly. I mean, I am, like many people, slightly sceptical about the number of people who are signed off, if you like, or are claiming benefit for what I would say are the sort of normal anxieties, the ups and downs of everyday life. We haven't got a resilient population, and, you know, we've just been talking about Europe's readiness for war. We're not actually resilient about anything. We've got people who can't cook, can't build anything, and aren't able to deal with the ups and downs of life. That isn't to say that mental illness isn't a really serious issue and should be funded, supported and treated properly. But it does seem astonishing, the number of people who are, you know, whether it's the GPs, overstretched GPs at fault, or whether it's a sort of a culture where you live, I don't know. But it does need to be addressed for sure.
Yes, Ben, how much do you think of this is actually real? It's people who genuinely believe they can't work, or are they looking at all these TikTok videos telling them how to claim benefits and then just living off the state?
So, I mean, I think this is, if you want one economic measure which indicates that the United Kingdom is in real trouble, it is the fact that you've got so many people out of the workforce. We have 7.2 million people now out of a workforce of about 31 million surviving to a greater or less extent on universal credit. A year ago, that was 6 million, and before the lockdowns, it was 3 million. And what it says to me is that we have, and I've said this before, we used to have a nanny state, which Blair kicked off, and then your leader, your former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, converted the nanny state into what I call a wet nurse. And I think locking people up at home, giving them money literally not to work, broke a lot of young people's working ethic. They saw that actually staying at home, working from home, which is now part of also our culture, is a perfectly normal thing to do. And the benefits system in this country has become progressively more generous. People aren't prepared to challenge it. You are seen to be extreme right-wing if you require people to work for a living. And, of course, in order to fund all of that, what the government's done is increase taxes on the working class and on small businesses, private enterprises, sole traders and so on. And so they've disincentivised work. At the same time as they've mollycoddled people who don't want to work, they've damaged those who are working. And we are in a downward spiral. And I said this when the leadership was being contested between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. You know, people were talking about how taxes would have to go up. It was the responsible thing to do. And actually, people were saying we couldn't afford not to raise taxes. And I was saying, actually, you can't afford not to cut taxes. Because if you want the United Kingdom working, you have to get people into the workplace. It takes a brave Prime Minister, a brave Chancellor, one that isn't undermined by the Office of Budget Responsibility, that seems unable to see anything clearly, to realise that to get people to work, you've got to make it pay to work. And there are two elements to that. They must have a fair wage, and our wages are appalling, you know, contributed by unskilled labour being, you know, mass immigration of unskilled labour, allow people to keep that which they earn, and this is the harsh bit, you've got to cut benefits. You've got to make it clear to people that you cannot be a long-term burden on the state. That doesn't mean that those who genuinely need a security blanket should be denied it.
Yeah.
But we've got to have some more tough, more muscular governing in the United Kingdom in order for this country to get off its backside and become the great country we once were.
One of the things, and again, it's the number of young people. I mean, shocking figures of the number of young people who are not in education, employment or training. Now, we knew, those of you that voted for Brexit, that we were suddenly going to have a huge shortage of people because all those fabulous Polish bricklayers and builders went back. We've now replaced those with legal migration from other countries, but we've got a 25,000 shortage of 25,000 bricklayers. So whether or not you agree with the government's plan to build 1.5 million homes, we haven't got anyone to build them. So all of these people, or many of these people, could have been, during the 14 years of the Tories, being trained. We have neglected vocational education terribly at the expense of sending kids off to do university degrees, and then the universities closed down during COVID. And I think, you know, I wouldn't necessarily agree with Ben's views on lockdown per se, but I do think that period where young people were not in the rough and tumble of learning how to commute, learning how to deal in an office, how to behave in an office, that sort of thing, I think it's made them terribly anxious. But, you know, that's not a reason not to go to work.
It isn't, but while the security blanket is there of being paid almost a salary to stay at home, but doesn't it call into question the entire welfare state? Because, of course, yes, most people would absolutely agree that people with, you know, short-term job loss or with really severe disabilities, of course, they need some support. But in the past, that support came from the family, and therefore, you're not going to fake being sick if it's your own family that have to pay the bill. And yet now people look at the taxpayer and think, oh, it's a faceless state bureaucracy. What's the incentive not to claim that? It doesn't cost me, it doesn't cost my family.
Well, I think that's part of the problem, and I think that's, you know, that's a much broader issue, which is about the conversation that governments and politicians of all parties need to have with the electorate. But it's, you know, if you want this, you are going to have to give up this. You know, we've got to be grown up. You can't promise, you know, jam tomorrow at the expense of something else. And I mean, but, you know, today we learn that there is a possibility that the Scunthorpe Steelworks are going to close. Now, that is thousands of jobs lost.
Yes, and also
there aren't
productivity,
any jobs.
balance of trade,
You know?
security.
So that's
But
at least 1,000
what government is going
families.
to be brave enough to do this, to cut taxes so there's more incentive to work, to cut benefits so that people aren't reliant? I mean, politically, it's very difficult.
But all they have to do, Miriam, in my view, is look at the fact that we've got the highest debt level since World War II, the highest levels of taxation as a proportion of GDP since World War II, and recognise that all this state spending and all this taxation hasn't resulted in the end product that we want. So they have to change direction. You think that it's obvious because we've taxed, borrowed and spent our way into penury. That's what we've done. And the massive amount of migration has done nothing other than damage the workforce in this country as well. It's made it impossible for wages to go up. And by the way, coming back to Trump, he's absolutely right to impose tariffs on other countries. Because when you impose tariffs on other countries that are dumping their products on you, Germany, for example, because of the cheap euro, you bring jobs back to your country. And we have had too much global integration of trade, and we need to focus more on the re-industrialisation of the United Kingdom.
Of course, we did have a very good, successful trade relationship with Europe, didn't we, until we came out of it?
We've never had a successful trade relationship with Europe. We ran a £100 billion annual deficit. It was terrible for our economics.
They were our best trading partners.
They are awful. They're mercantilists. They exploited us.
Well, unfortunately, all of Europe and the UK and the US have terrible balances of trade because we've all got used to offshoring our industrialisation to other parts of the world. And that is why Trump is doing this, because he wants to reindustrialise America, even though... and it's not his business, really, whether that impacts us. But just want to come back to what you were saying about the OBR, Ben, because you're right, the OBR puts a straitjacket on the Chancellor, basically. So whatever the Chancellor does, she has to be able to prove that as a result of her measures, our debt-to-GDP ratio will be falling in 5 years' time. Now, Now, in theory, that's a good idea. We want debt to come down. But a lot of the things that you want to do, cut taxes, reindustrialise, these kind of things, in 5 years' time, they will actually be more expensive. Shouldn't we just scrap those strictures and let the Chancellor do what she needs to do?
We should absolutely abolish the OBR, and we should, while we're at it, abolish a whole load of other quangos at the same time. The OBR is incapable of thinking other than through a kind of tick-box bookkeeping exercise. It is unable to understand that if you cut taxes, people's behaviour will change.
Yeah.
It just does.
Then we're going to have to leave it there because we're running out of time. So don't go anywhere. Coming up, Reform UK leader has said men are prepared to sacrifice their family lives more than women. Is he right? Stay with us.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Sunshine and warmth return next week with high pressure building, but for the time being the weather is very changeable. Showers ease overnight with some clear spells, but further rain from a weak system will turn up from the west during Saturday. Here's the high that will arrive from Sunday. For the time being, it is extending somewhat towards the UK, helping to kill off those showers, but some showers remain for the north and west of Scotland. Patchy cloud here and thickening cloud ahead of the aforementioned weather front across Northern Ireland. So generally frost-free with the breezy and cloudier conditions in the northwest. Otherwise, with lighter winds and clear skies extensively. Temperatures dipping to 3 Celsius typically and a little below in some parts of southern UK. But that's where the brightest blue skies would be as we begin Saturday. Yeah, it'll be a fresh feel first thing if you're out and about, but you'll feel the warmth from the sun early on, I suspect. Northern Ireland, that thicker cloud already in place. And for much of western Scotland, already at this stage, it is raining. Some showers for the Northern Isles, still some sunshine for the east and south of Scotland. But it's not going to last, unfortunately, if you are keen to view the partial solar eclipse. Don't forget to view it safely. But I think for Scotland and Northern Ireland, not much chance as the cloud thickens here. Likewise for Northern England and parts of Wales. The eclipse takes place between 10 a.m. and midday. But for much of central and eastern and southern England, I think there's a decent chance. Plenty of sunshine continuing. And still warm enough in the southeast by the afternoon with that sunny shine, but cool elsewhere. A cool start to Sunday, a blustery start as well, particularly for the north and east of the UK. But it's at this point that higher pressure is beginning to build, so the wind eases through the day, sunshine develops widely, and we keep that sunshine going throughout much of next week. As a result, temperatures are going to rise up to the low 20s by Thursday.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. I've still got my fantastic panel with me, Ben Habib and Joe Phillips. And yesterday, you'll be surprised to hear Nigel Farage said something controversial. Speaking at an event in Parliament, he talked about how jobs in the workplace should be on merit, not on particular characteristics, and pointed out that, in his view, men make more sacrifices, sacrificing their family life, in order to get to the top. And that explains why there are more men at the top of big businesses. Joe, do you think it's a sexist comment or a truism?
I do know that Nigel is a great traditionalist, but quite why he's gone back to the 1970s, God only knows. It is utterly ridiculous. What are these sacrifices? The sacrifices of having to look after children, look after older relatives, to drop everything to go and collect somebody from school or take somebody to school. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. And I'm sure he was just doing it to wind people up. But it is deeply depressing that in 2020, 2025, somebody who is the leader of a political party thinks that women should basically be...
But there is another interpretation, which is what he meant, is that men are more willing to miss out on time with their children.
Of course they are, because they've got women doing it for them.
Maybe, although all the polling shows women actually want to be at home with their children when they're very small. But anyway, leave that aside. But Ben, isn't there another interpretation of this? A lot of men reach the top of their careers and the end of their careers and actually regret making those sacrifices.
Well, I missed my children when they were little. I had a very traditional family life. I went out to work and my wife was able to stay at home and look after them. But of course, as any parent, I miss them now that they've grown up. But that's not really the point. I think the point here is there are a number of points. And I think what motivated Nigel Farage to say what he said was that this promotion of individuals' rights, putting people into the workplace, progressively discriminating in their favour in the pursuit of liberalism has gone too far, and that we've got to yank it back to meritocracy. Protected status now doesn't just apply to women, it applies to ethnic minorities, minority religious beliefs, minority sexual preferences.
We've just been talking about people on disability benefits saying they ought to go to work. You've got to, at some point, give a little bit of support and help to get people into work.
Yeah, but you've got to cut taxes and you've got to cut benefits and you've got to have training. Those are the fundamental components of getting an economy
We are
working.
going to have to leave it there. No one can accuse either of you two of not giving enough commitments to this show. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for watching at home. Please stay on GB News. Lots more coming up tonight. And we'll see you shortly. Thanks for watching.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Sunshine and warmth return next week with high pressure building, but for the time being the weather is very changeable. Showers ease overnight with some clear spells, but further rain from a weak system will turn up from the west during Saturday. Here's the high that will arrive from Sunday. For the time being, it is extending somewhat towards the UK, helping to kill off those showers, but some showers remain for the north and west of Scotland. Patchy cloud here and thickening cloud ahead of the aforementioned weather front across Northern Ireland. So generally frost-free with the breezy and cloudier conditions in the northwest. Otherwise, with lighter winds and clear skies extensively. Temperatures dipping to 3 Celsius typically and a little below in some parts of southern UK. But that's where the brightest blue skies would be as we begin Saturday. Yeah, it'll be a fresh feel first thing if you're out and about, but you'll feel the warmth from the sun early on, I suspect. Northern Ireland, that thicker cloud already in place. And for much of western Scotland, already at this stage, it is raining. Some showers for the Northern Isles, still some sunshine for the east and south of Scotland. But it's not going to last, unfortunately, if you are keen to view the partial solar eclipse. Don't forget to view it safely. But I think for Scotland and Northern Ireland, not much chance as the cloud thickens here. Likewise for Northern England and parts of Wales. The eclipse takes place between 10 a.m. and midday. But for much of central and eastern and southern England, I think there's a decent chance. Plenty of sunshine continuing. And still warm enough in the southeast by the afternoon with that sunny shine, but cool elsewhere. A cool start to Sunday, a blustery start as well, particularly for the north and east of the UK. But it's at this point that higher pressure is beginning to build, so the wind eases through the day. Sunshine develops widely, and we keep that sunshine going throughout much of next week. As a result, temperatures are going to rise up to the low 20s by Thursday.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems in North Lanarkshire to the southwest of Cumbernauld. If you are heading north up the M73, perhaps away from Glasgow, the exit slip road onto the northbound M80 is partly blocked by a collision causing long queues. And if you're heading towards London through Surrey up the M3, the two outside lanes closed off just south of the M25 interchange following an accident. South London, the A212 Whitehorse Road at Thornton Heath blocks for accident investigation work. And in Wiltshire, the A303 is blocked westbound on the Amesbury bypass following a serious accident near Stonehenge. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
It's the final week to see how you could spruce up your spring, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but 2 sought-after designer watches. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.